Welcome to Talking Business, a podcast produced in Melbourne, Australia. The podcast is available on the Acast site, my own website, the Apple Podcast Store, or wherever you go to get your podcasts. Or you can get it at the Business Acumen website at www.businessacumen.biz. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from my website, leongettler.com, or whatever your favourite podcast platform is. I'm Leon Gettler. My job is to review and monitor the week's news in business, finance and economics. I bring it all to you every week. This is episode number 26 in our series for 2025, and today's date is Friday, August the 8th. First, I'll be talking to Tim Bhatnagar, co-founder of Dubai-based Paiverse, about how his platform works with all luxury NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, unique digital assets that represent ownership of the brand. Now, a lot of NFTs have drawn large amounts of fraudulent criminal activity. Bhatnagar explains how Paiverse uses blockchain to ensure the NFTs have a provable provenance and are free of fraud. Now, these NFTs seek to be the primary destination for luxury brands to market and for consumers to buy and sell their luxury goods via blockchain technology in a secure and transparent manner. And I'll be talking to Rabobank economist Tjeuva Meversen about how China's economy is faring in the wake of the tariff war with the US and tensions with the EU. But first, let's talk to Tim Bhatnagar.
Well, Tim, there's been a whole lot of issues with NFTs and fraud for a start, but you say Payverse has the solution for that. Is that right?
Yeah, we'd like to think so. We are quite a unique one-off platform that is trying to resolve two problems, or two of the biggest problems in the NFT world, to give something meaningful and tangible to the asset holder, and to have the provenance and the deception that is going on in the world. So we are quite unique in our solution, that we are giving an asset-backed NFT to the world.
How do you protect against the frauds that we're seeing?
No, so to understand the word or the problem with the fraud, you have to understand the word NFT first, in my opinion. So NFTs in itself are nothing but a traditional JPEG or a picture that is in its digital form, like the trading cards we used to play as probably you and me were younger. Probably, I wouldn't want to say that I'm any older or younger than yourself, but yeah, I'm just saying. And so back in the days, obviously, we had some unique digital, playing cards, and now they've taken a digital form. So now NFT is a JPEG representation of something that is unique, something that can be replaced, something that shouldn't exist in its duality. It's singular, it's unique, and it's in its one form. So that's what is NFT. Now, the whole problem with the word NFT is, or in today's mainstream Web3 world, is around the fraud that is happening, right? So when you look at other Web3 projects, and we do a lot of due diligence on other companies to kind of measure ourselves, you get to see a lot of Ponzi schemes, right? So something that doesn't exist or is a pump and dump, right? They create a hype, They come in, they create a lot of noise, people get drawn into the subject, they go and trade a JPEG of sorts, and then the companies disappear, right? It's in its very essence, in my opinion, it's nothing but a non-traditional asset or alternative asset. So like you do a due diligence before you go and buy real estate, you go and buy a car, a house, whatever you do. You want to know who the builder is. You want to know who the underlying developer is. You want to understand the company, the people. And in today's world, on Instagram and Twitter, a lot of individuals kind of get drawn into this fear of missing out, or FOMO as we call it, right? It's, if this person has it, it must be legit. Right. So we again think that we are one of the very few companies that are fully doxed, because we want people to know who I am, who my core team members are, what do we do, how did we incepted this firm, and we don't believe in the theory of insider trading. A lot of other NFT firms are at the moment, to give an illusion of volume, they would trade between different wallets. They would transfer the asset from one wallet to the other wallet. And you will see, it's on blockchain. So if you spend enough time, you can totally see what is happening, right? Under layer. So it's fascinating to see that some of the wallets that are minting these assets have no funds in there, yet they keep showing the tradable value in several hundred thousands. So it's a fun gig.
So Payverse does not allow sort of transfer between wallets. Is that right?
No, so what we do is, so we work directly with the brands. So as I started the call and I said to you, we are the only asset-backed NFT platform. So what we do is we work directly with the brand owner. Our first NFT was the rarest Welsh whiskey that was ever released. So we took possession of the asset. We transformed it into a digital form. So now you are trading an NFT, but it's always being backed by something physical, right? So yes, you can buy and sell and trade it. We insure it, we ship it, we do all the things logistically, but technically you are always directly connected to the brand and you are trading their asset rather than something that I physically created in my computer.
So Payverse is the platform for non-fungible tokens.
It is.
And it's basically that. I would imagine NFTs are very big in luxury goods. Would that be right?
Yeah. So I mean, in fact, of late, so much fraud, deception, negative press, crypto winter, you hear it all, right? To launch a company in this environment has been a real challenge. But again, being a compliance guy or guy with a compliance background for multiple decades, along with my co-founder, we think the right thing is happening, right? Only the true legitimate platforms will exist once this whole fraud and deception is over, right? So what we are trying to ascertain is making sure that the individuals understand the brand, the community, the assets that we are bringing. And we are trying to move away from the word NFTs. So non-fungible tokens are okay, non-fungible, but truly what we are giving on our platform is a digital title to a physical asset, right? So it's nothing, but you know that the brand has released a luxury item. You are trading its digital title, and you can redeem your digital title at any given time, and the asset can be shipped across to you, or we, at least if you are in one of the 37 countries that we have done our due diligence on. So we, at that point, we take you through a KYC. Of course, we want to know who's redeeming what, where, how, and that's when the product is shipped off to you. But at any given time, you are not obliged to redeem any of your asset. You can continue to trade it, knowing fully well that the physical is being taken care by ourselves. So it's fully insured to that value.
What's the role of regulatory compliance in ensuring transparency and integrity in this alternative asset industry?
Well, I mean, so there are two. So alternative asset industry in its essence is quite regulated, right? I mean, you see the REITs, the hedge funds, etc. They are quite a regulated product. So there's some mainstream knowledge about it. But Web3, the NFTs, the cryptocurrency, I mean, their inception was to move away from a centralized kind of, clearer or a marketplace. So the theory started with, let's do away with the government. But as more and more fraud started happening, what people realized that you need regulation. You need central compliance. You need a defined set of rules to ensure that people put trust in this thing. So initially when we registered our company, we were Bahamas-based, and after much kind of, soul searching, we recently relocated ourselves to Dubai. And why we decided to move to Dubai is because the regulator over here is putting quite a bit of precedence on getting the right kind of crowd, getting the right kind of ecosystem developed, because so many people have been burnt of late and lost their savings. A lot of regulatory agencies globally are seeing this as quite a negative thing. I don't think it's a negative thing. I mean, I once read, and I truly believe in, blockchain is an extraordinary technology searching for the ordinary use case. And I think this is the ordinary use case, because how can you not move away from the full provenance, the full traceability, the full transparency of owning something, knowing what was the last traded price, on who redeemed it, where were they located, what was the brand behind it? And again, it's about due diligence. So I think the regulators are starting to catch up, and we are trying to help as many regulatory agencies, due to our background, to understand how to develop these kind of regulations.
Well, what would be the benefits of the value investing through alternative assets for the ordinary people?
And it's a very interesting question, because it's a supply and demand scenario, right? I mean, there have been auction houses, there have been mainstream sort of publications and companies that have been doing this for decades, if not generations, right? The likes of Christie's and Sotheby's, and so they are doing it. What we are mirroring now, or what we are trying to do, is exactly the same thing, but on a blockchain, because inherently there's value in every asset, right? And luxury and rare assets are at the mainstream because people understand and realize that there is a value in the Birkin bag, there is a value in a rare bottle of Macallan, there is value in these, unique goods. But because there has been so much fraud around it, right? How do you ascertain that the value of the bottle you are trading, it's got the actual Macallan inside it, right? And that's why we decided to only work with the brands. So not the people like you and me who have a Rolex on hand, but if I can't ascertain its provenance of it, I cannot release it on my platform.
I would say that because it's on blockchain, that would actually assert its integrity, wouldn't it? Because blockchain is pretty straight up and down.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's a unique. I think if I was releasing or the company was releasing only digital assets, it would have been quite simple because the inception of something. But because our NFTs or our digital titles have a tie back to a physical item, so our company needs to ascertain that is legit, its origins are legit. We know the people and the brand behind it because we are working very closely with an artist to release one of its kind art-backed NFT very shortly. So we had to work very closely with the artists and saying what are the limited number of pieces, how have they been drawn, put the whole story behind it. And that's when we kind of mirrored into the world of blockchain because it's kind of, being dropped into a digital world. And from there on, it will take its own life and start trading. Right.
And blockchain is such that it can be easily traced. Everything can be traced in blockchain.
And Leon, this is my, one and the only thing that I want to educate as many people as possible is do your due diligence. It's by its very nature, you can go and trace everything, right? But people don't go and trace anything. I mean, it's crazy.
But my point is that it's much easier to trace on blockchain than anywhere else. You would agree
absolutely.
With that?
I 100% agree. I mean, it's one of the most remarkable technology. I mean, I suppose ChatGPT is the new one that has taken the worldwide form, but blockchain is the remarkable.
Blockchain is remarkable. Yes, and I think blockchain will have more of an impact, actually.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Leon, and I look forward to hearing more of you.
And now let's talk to Rabobank economist Tuba Meverson.
Well, Tuba, how's the Chinese economy holding up at the moment with the tariffs?
Well, still relatively well, I would say. Of course, the challenges that we discussed the last time are still present. We still have to wait for the 12th of August, what happens between the US and China. We also now see, of course, that the relationship between the European Union and China is also, could be defined as a difficult one, let's say a difficult marriage. So today the EU-China leadership is being held in Beijing, basically as part of 50 years of official diplomatic ties between the European Union and China. And von der Leyen already said that the EU-China relation is at an inflection point. And you see that while there are still some shared interests between both economic powers, there's also quite some disagreements about important major topics. So, it's holding up well. GDP growth in the second quarter was also above expectations. But the future comes with many uncertainties still.
One of those uncertainties is the need for more stimulus. Surely.
Also, and then it's also very important what kind of stimulus we're talking about, because much of the stimulus in the past has gone to the supply side. So large, sizable subsidies for certain strategic industries instead of sufficiently stimulating the demand side of the economy. And this is despite China emphasizing the importance of consumption for their economy. It's also part of their strategy of dual circulation, where they want consumption to have a more important role in GDP. But this will be a long process, a process of decades instead of years. And that is while your most important trading partners already lost a lot of patience, basically. So also both the European Union as well as the United States, but also increasingly so developed economics economies, are looking for a more equitable trade relationship with China. But again, given the likely slow pace of this economic transition from an export manufacturing based economy towards a more consumption based economy will take a long time, and it's questionable whether China's most important trading partners will have the patience to await for this process to really take hold.
On the other hand, the world is still dependent on goods from China.
True. Yeah. And no, definitely. And this is also what they are, let's say, using so this is also what the European Union means coercive trade practices. And this is especially relevant when it comes, for instance, to rare earth metals and rare earth magnets that are crucial for the production of goods within the energy transition, but also the defense sector, and of course the car sector as well. So these there's definitely there are some dependencies from China's trade partners, but you also see that China's trade partners are being busy to look for alternatives, and of course the West is also planning to, and especially the United States, to bring back some of this manufacturing capacity, so that they are also able to produce certain goods within their borders. So yeah, these are all long-term trends that are taking place on both sides, for that matter.
Well, there's a whole lot of uncertainties there. I mean, we don't know whether the US can actually rebuild a manufacturing base there, because it's basically a service economy. And
That's true.
So you've got those issues there. And so that could take decades as well.
It could, although I think that especially in some strategic sectors, I think the US is likely to, let's say, invest a lot of money in, for instance, shipbuilding. Both for their merchandise shipping as well as defense sector. And by imposing import tariffs, the US, of course, makes it more attractive for US firms to rebuild some manufacturing capacity because domestic prices will increase because of those tariffs. So therefore, it will be more attractive for certain manufacturing sectors to indeed build up new manufacturing capacity in the US. Yes, it will also take some time, but it will take less time than, for instance, China transitioning from its current economic model towards a more consumption-based economy. And you also see it in Europe, of course, and the government in some cases is subsidizing that, or at least stimulating that. And in Europe, we see that, of course, also for the defense sector. So I don't expect the US to start building manufacturing capacities for consumer electronics, for instance. That's not what I expect, but I do expect that the West will try to reallocate manufacturing within their borders for certain strategic sectors.
At the same time, Europe has, or the EU has, certain tensions with the US, so that could actually play into the EU's relationship with China as well.
That's true, and we know, of course, that Scott Bessent has unfolded this plan basically to offer countries or economic blocs like the European Union a, let's say, more friendly tariff if they join or group against China. At the same time, the European it's a very complex relationship because also Europe and the US need each other, and while the European Union, of course, does share some concerns with the US regarding their relationship with China, also China's posturing in the South Chinese Sea, regarding Taiwan, regarding the investment relationship, regarding the trade relationship. So there are a lot of shared grievances, so to say, between the EU and the US when it comes to dealing with China. Having said that, it's also true that the European Union is increasingly striving for strategic autonomy. So they really want to have their own independent foreign policies, and that would extend, of course, to the bilateral relationship between the European Union and China. So while there are many shared interests between the US and the European Union, both also have their own specific interests in their relationship with China. So yeah, and I think Europe has also clearly signaled this, let's say, willingness to fight US pressure by announcing this package of counter tariffs basically for US goods, which would impose tariffs on about 100 billion of US goods entering the European market. So it's a very complex triangular relationship when you look at the EU, the United States, and China.
Well, my judgment of it is you have a whole lot of unknowns in there that we just don't know how it's going to pan out over the next period of time.
Absolutely. I mean, having said that, I think there are a few certainties. My expectations are that the relationship between the trade relationship between the European Union and China is likely to become even more tensed. And again, this has mainly to do with the fact that China's transition towards a more consumer-based economy will take more time than the European Union has patience. So I think this is again a very important thing to realize. Basically, the dissatisfaction with the EU regarding the trade relationship with China is now, and the solutions will be far in the future. So that will continue to bring tensions in this relationship. And moreover, of course, what has become clear after Wang Yi visited Kallas some weeks ago is that China does not consider stopping its aid to Russia. And while China stops short of providing lethal aid, they still provide crucial aid for Russia's war machine to continue its aggression towards Ukraine. And this is also, makes the relationship between the European Union and China very complicated. So this is what I do expect from the future. That these relations between the European Union and China, as well as the US and China, will be tensed for the foreseeable future. And if anything, tensions are likely to increase instead of decrease.
And whatever happens with tariffs, as you say, it will take decades for China to transition to a consumer-based economy.
Yeah, true. So, China is also, of course, trying other things like whitewashing trade. So basically export their goods to other countries, either or not in the direct vicinity of China, and then export these goods from those countries towards both the US and Europe. So this is what's happening. But Trump is also cracking down on these, let's say, ways of China still trying to export its goods. And you still also see that despite, for instance, some of the tariffs that the European Union has imposed on China, that the trade deficit with China over the first 6 months of this year has reached a new record high. Now, partly this is because of front loading, of course, but the relationship from European Union's perspective is becoming even more inequitable, if anything, and also that will continue to be an obstacle for better EU-China relations. So I agree with you that it will take a very long time for China to be able to do something about this inequitable relationship. But even then, it's questionable whether China will start to import more because of current overcapacity in some sectors in China. So, if anything, increased demand within China could very well be Chinese companies could very well benefit most from this trend to transition to a more consumption-based economy.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll be watching all these imponderables, and especially with what's going to happen on August the 12th.
Yeah,
We're watching it with great fascination. Well, thank you very much, Juva. Thank you.
Most welcome, and till next time, Leon.
So what's happening in the news? Well, in the uneven choreography of US-China trade relations, Beijing appears to be executing a Tai Chi routine, stepping back, waiting, and let the US tire itself out. Because while China's dominance of global manufacturing remains one of the main drivers of President Donald Trump's aggressive trade policy, he appears to have saved his fiercest fight for his allies and partners, such as Canada, Mexico, India, and even Japan. Just over 4 months ago, he slapped tariffs of up to 145% on China-made goods, triggering a global market meltdown. Intense negotiations and an interim deal quickly got those down to around 30%, and talks continue for an even better accord. Trump's rhetoric toward China has also notably cooled recently. Gone are the fire and brimstone threats of sweeping tariffs on everything. Instead, he is now openly courting China's President Xi Jinping for a summit, and has even floated the idea of visiting Beijing himself, an overture that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Apple Chief Executive Tim Cook warned during an earnings call last week that US tariffs would add US $1.1 billion in costs over the current quarter, up from US $800 million in the 3 months to the end of June. Nor is Apple alone. Adidas, Procter & Gamble, Stanley Black & Decker and other large companies have told investors they either had increased prices or plan to do so soon to offset the tariff costs. Companies such as Walmart and toy makers Hasbro and Mattel had already warned that tariffs would lead to higher prices. China is watching all the other interactions with America's trade partners, and they can see the internal stress within the US is increasing and increasing, said David Mann, an investment manager and advisor based in Beijing. The longer they wait it out, the Americans will be in an increasingly weaker position. We can already see the tone has shifted towards a more conciliatory one. That leaves China, which has refused to engage on Washington's erratic terms. Instead, Beijing is practicing what experts call strategic patience. While Trump dashes between press conferences and policy reversals, Chinese negotiators have stood still, calculating, waiting, and watching as the US economy bruises itself. And Tesla granted shares to Elon Musk worth nearly $30 billion, the company said on Monday, describing it as a good faith award to help retain the car maker's chief executive after his previous multi-billion-dollar pay package was struck down by a judge. The company approved a grant of 96 million shares for Mr. Musk, which he could tap after 2 years of service in a senior leadership role at Tesla. The mercurial billionaire, whose business empire includes rockets, artificial intelligence, brain implants and more, hinted last month that he wanted more shares in Tesla on top of his 13% stake to prevent his ouster by activist shareholders. With the new shares, Mr. Musk would own nearly 16% of Tesla, a stake that would be worth over $150 billion. The package amounts to an extraordinary pay rise for Mr. Musk, as Tesla's shares and profits are falling, and the company is losing market share in part because of his behaviour. His involvement in right-wing politics has alienated many liberal car buyers who are more likely than conservatives to buy electric vehicles. Mr. Musk is already the world's richest person, worth about $350 billion according to Bloomberg. The action by Tesla's board of directors is likely to fuel criticism that the members, who include several close friends and his brother, are failing to act as a check on Mr. Musk. In a regulatory filing, the board did not impose any conditions besides the one about staying in a senior role. Typically, executive pay is tied to performance goals. The new award will be worth $27 billion to Mr. Musk after taking into account the money he will have to spend to acquire the shares. None of this is normal, said Brian J. M. Quinn, a professor at Boston College Law School. Like in all things Musk, there is nothing like this. And expanding Australia's goods and services tax, council land rates and the tax on offshore oil and gas will be the most growth-friendly way to pay for reductions in corporate tax, according to modelling for the Productivity Commission. Among the most economically damaging potential changes would be to raise more government revenue through the existing corporate tax system and from high earners already paying a 47% rate for incomes above $190,000. The previously unreported modelling by independent economist Chris Murphy was commissioned by the Productivity Commission and attached to its report on corporate tax released last week in the lead-up to Treasurer Jim Chalmers' Economic Roundtable from August the 19th to the 21st. Mr. Murphy is recognised as one of the nation's leading economic modellers on tax and did similar work for former Treasury Secretary Ken Henry's swooping tax review in 2009. Fueled by dozens of submissions and demands from stakeholders and special interest groups, and expectations have been growing that Chalmers would use the roundtable as cover to overhaul the economy and implement major policy changes, including to tax, which Labor did not take to the federal election. A 40-page modelling report by economist Murphy lays out the economic cost of various taxes and the impact if they were adjusted. Per dollar of revenue raised, the GST does the least economic harm, followed by personal income tax, followed by company income tax, with the most economic harm, Murphy's report says, of the three largest tax bases. Raising more revenue from local council rates, a form of land tax on the unimproved value of all properties, including the principal place of residence, would also have no negative impact on economic growth. Extending the GST to fresh food would have a low marginal excess burden of only 16%. Raising the 10% GST rate would have a 30% marginal excess burden, still far lower from various income taxes and corporate tax. The excess burden of a tax measures the economic harm from a tax's disincentive effects, such as on work and investment. It estimates the economic harm from raising an additional dollar of revenue from a particular tax. In contrast, raising more revenue from the existing corporate tax base had a higher marginal excess burden of 80%, and the top marginal rate had a 76% burden. The 2% Medicare levy on income earners had a marginal excess burden of 36%, and bracket creep had a burden of 32%. And the Australian Council of Trade Unions have a number of demands for Treasurer Jim Chalmers' Economic Roundtable on August 19th and 21st. It has called for bold changes to negative gearing and the capital gains tax at the government's productivity roundtable this month, arguing the tax breaks to be limited to one investment property. Under the proposal, the current arrangements would continue for 5 years to allow investors time to rethink their portfolios before the changes come into force. The issue is politically fraught for Labor, who took reforms to negative gearing and capital gains in the 2016 and 19 federal elections and lost. But ACTU Secretary Sally McManus told ABC's Insiders it was time to bite the bullet. Otherwise, we're just going to say, too bad, young people, you're not going to be able to ever own a home, she said. Since 2019, the problem has just got worse. It's going to continue to get worse unless the government is brave enough. The ACTU will also demand a minimum 25% tax rate on both individuals who earn more than $1 million a year and family trusts at Treasurer Jim Chalmers' Economic Roundtable, along with changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions. The ACTU will also push for a 25% levy on all exported LNG revenue in place of the petroleum resource rent tax, which will raise up to $16 billion a year, as well as a $20 million annual cap on the diesel fuel rebate, a move that would largely affect major commodities companies. The peak union body's proposed tax measures are the latest in a series of ideas ahead of the summit to increase government revenue. And Australia's defence recruitment has hit a 15-year high after the federal government began showering more than $600 million on soldiers, sailors and aviators in bonuses and housing subsidies to stay in the military. The government is also easing enlistment standards in preparation for a potential showdown with China. This is not before time. After years of failing to hit recruitment and retention targets, the number of full-time uniformed personnel across the Army, Air Force and Navy reached almost 62,000 as of 1st of July this year, an increase of almost 3,000. Labor is also refusing to buckle, for now, to demand from the Trump administration to lift defence spending by about $40 billion a year to the equivalent of 3.5% of gross domestic product, as part of a pressure campaign on all US allies to lift military budgets to take on a greater share of the security burden amid rising geopolitical tensions with China and Russia. Both the Albanese government and before that the coalition, when it was in power, have pledged to increase the size of the Australian Defence Force, which has hovered about 58,000 uniformed personnel. Defence Minister Richard Marles said Labor inherited a recruitment crisis, and they're using innovative ways to recruit. Between 2023 and 2028, the government will spend almost $570 million on continuation bonuses to keep personnel in the military after 4 or 7 years of service. The bonuses are worth $40,000 each, and the government says 5,778 personnel have taken up the bonus, including 2,306 who'd been undecided about staying in the military or intended to leave. Changes have also been made to improve the so-called value proposition for servicemen and women. This includes expanding the Defence Home Ownership Scheme so people can receive help to buy a house earlier in their military career and trialling earlier eligibility for rent assistance. Budget papers show the government spending an extra $88 million on defence housing over the next 3 years. These changes have helped reduce the separation rate where people leave the Defence Force from 11.2% in 2021-22 to 7.9%, the lowest in a decade, and defying a tight labour market where ex-military personnel with a trade can usually find work in the private sector easily. Defence is also always one of the biggest advertisers in Australia and spent over $63 million on commercials and market research last year. It has skewed more of its funding towards digital advertising, social media and in-game ads to reach younger audiences who are less likely to engage with traditional formats such as commercial television. Last year, Defence published its first video advertisement on TikTok, a platform that public servants are banned from using on government-issued devices, with a clip promoting life as a submariner viewed 840,000 times, a record for a social media platform. Another change has been a relaxation of recruitment standards. Conditions such as acne are no longer a bar to enlistment. And the local chief executive, Bat Bacon, a British insurance giant Howden, says as many as 70% of the country's middle market businesses are underinsured. Bacon said one of the biggest insurance issues raised by his clients was the threat of cyber attack after an uptick in high-profile incidents, including breaches at Optus and Medibank Private over the past few years. Australia is the fourth most targeted nation for cyber attacks, according to American firm Nozomi Networks. Threats against manufacturing, mining and minerals companies are particularly on the rise. 10 years ago, we weren't really talking about cyber, and now cyber is a major discussion point in pretty much every board table, Bacon said. And Woolworths, Coles and McDonald's say they will not import US beef following Australia's loosening of biosecurity restrictions. In a contentious move, the federal government has allowed Canadian and Mexican cattle killed in the US to be imported into Australia. Following the change to this 20-year policy, the Trump administration slapped Australia with the lowest of its universal tariff rates, applying a 10% levy on Australian exports. Despite the North American beef now allowed to land in Australia, consumers are unlikely to see much US beef on supermarket shelves or in fast food restaurants. Aldi, Coles, McDonald's and Woolworths all say Australian customers will be eating homegrown beef. We apply an Australia First approach, and 100% of our fresh red meat is sourced directly from Australian farmers with whom we have long-standing relationships, a Woolworths spokesman said. We have no plans to change that approach. Spokespeople for Aldi and Coles say there are no plans to change from 100% Australian beef. Some 80 million kilos of beef are dished out by the Golden Arches each year, and McDonald's too says it will not be buying from North America. And it's the profit reporting season. Argo Investments' net profit for the year to June 30 rose $259.8 million, up from $253 million a year earlier. Credit Corp reported a net profit after tax increase of 16% to $94.1 million, after prior year's NPAT of $81.2 million. Reckon reported a 35% increase in net profit after tax of $4 million. Pinnacle Investments reported a net profit after tax of $134.4 million, up 49% from $90.4 million in the prior financial year. A record year at REA Group and Dow Jones drove an increase in revenue and earnings for Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, which on Wednesday morning delivered its first full-year results since selling pay TV firm Foxtel. News Corp posted US $8.5 billion, that's $13.1 billion Aussie, in revenue for the year to June 30, up 2%, and earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation and amortisation of US $1.42 billion, up 14%. Murdoch's REA Group's reported net profit jumped by 124% to $678 million. Real estate investment trust WP Trust, which manages commercial properties like the Bunnings chain, reported that moderating inflation, stabilising interest rates and resilient demand for large format retail property helped Bunnings Warehouse sites deliver a 47% jump in net profit to $265.6 million. Charter Hall Long WALE REIT reported operating earnings of $178.6 million. And that's it for this week. And next week I'll be talking to Bob Huber, Chief Security Officer and Head of Research at Tenable, who will talk about the prevalence of AI-generating deepfakes and recent findings that highlight their ability to sway voter opinions, distort political narratives, and the specific tactics deepfake creators can employ to target Australian voters. From a business perspective, deepfakes are increasingly dangerous in swaying consumer trends and corporate reputation. And I'll be talking to EY economist Sherelle Murphy about the potential of the Reserve Bank of Australia cutting interest rates. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from my website, leongettler.com, or from whatever your favourite podcast platform is. If you like Talking Business, please leave us a review with Apple Podcasts. Thank you in advance. In the meantime, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, or X as it's now known, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you want to contact me, email me at leon@leongettler.com. I answer all emails. Also in my spare time, I have a copywriting business. If anyone needs newsletters, blogs, articles or advertorial, email me. Looking forward to the next episode of Talking Business next week.